Welcome back, Focus Learners, to another explainer. Today, I want you to just imagine I'm sitting right next to you in the right seat of the cockpit. We're going to put on our flight instructor hats and practice a perfect rep of the traffic pattern. We're talking about the visual approach, that beautiful, synchronized dance of altitude, airspeed, and spatial awareness that sets you up for a flawless landing. It is all about precision, anticipation, and keeping ahead of the airplane. Consider this our pre-flight briefing. Here's exactly what we're going to practice today. 1. Joining the traffic pattern. 2. Nailing your descent point. 3. Mastering the base turn. 4. Correcting for the wind. And 5. Turning onto final approach. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Joining the traffic pattern, entering the pattern and pre-landing checks. Let's get our bearings here. Whether you're flying a standard left-hand traffic pattern or a right-hand pattern, your entry procedure is exactly the same. You want to enter in level flight right abeam the midpoint of the runway and bang on pattern altitude. You're flying with reference to the horizon and your instruments, sure, but, and this is absolutely crucial, you are positioning the aircraft relative to the runway. You maintain this pattern altitude until you're right abeam the approach end of the runway. But hey, while you're cruising downwind, there is some really critical work to be done. You've got to knock out those pre-landing checks, and you need to do it fast. Brakes off, gear down, waiting on those 3 green lights, mixture rich, fuel set on the correct tank with the pump on, and hatches and harnesses secure. Why are we rushing to get this done? Because you want this mental checklist completely finished by the midpoint of the downwind leg. If you finish early, it frees up your entire mental bandwidth. You get to stop being a systems manager and go back to being a pilot, focusing 100% on flying the plane, judging the wind, and setting up your descent. Moving right along to Section 2, nailing your descent point, when and where to start coming down. So identifying exactly when gravity enters the equation is basically what makes or breaks your glide path. Knowing the exact moment to pull that power back is everything. The descent for a normal approach commences the absolute second you are abeam the landing threshold. Boom, that is your cue. You reduce power, adjust your pitch for descent speed, and trim the aircraft. Your ultimate goal here is to judge that descent and tweak your power and flaps so that eventually you roll out onto final approach no lower than 500 feet above the airport and at least a quarter mile from the threshold. If you nail this spot on the downwind, the rest of the geometry just magically starts falling perfectly into place. Which brings us to Section 3, Mastering the base turn, the critical transition phase. I'm putting my strict instructor hat on for a second here because I need to warn you, this right here is exactly where things most frequently go sideways for student pilots. By definition, your base turn is a descending turn made from the downwind leg when the runway threshold is at a 45-degree angle behind your wing. You have to literally look outside and use that visual 45-degree cue. Now, some folks might tell you to turn earlier, but I'm telling you, an early turn changes your whole perspective of the runway. It makes your judgment of the approach way less consistent, so wait for that 45-degree mark. And I really want you to burn this golden rule into your memory. It is always easier and safer to reduce the bank after turning early than to tighten the turn. When you're low to the ground, maneuvering at slow speeds, there's this intense, almost magnetic psychological temptation to steepen your bank angle to force the airplane to line up. Don't do it. Steep turns near the ground are incredibly dangerous. If you overshoot, you just keep your bank angle medium, fly right through the final approach line, and correct it safely. Never violently yank the airplane around. Let's tackle Section 4, Correcting for the wind, adapting to environmental chaos. Because, let's be real, the perfect pattern only exists in a vacuum. Wind is the ultimate real-time test of your spatial awareness. Think about what wind does to our perfectly planned geometry. With a normal base turn, everything's fine. But if you've got a tailwind on the base leg, that wind is literally pushing your aircraft across the ground faster than your airspeed indicates, blowing you right through the extended runway centerline. It is a total trap. You have to recognize the environment you're flying in way before you actually reach the turn. So here's how you anticipate that wind instead of just reacting in a panic. Got a tailwind on base? You must initiate your turn onto final early to avoid blowing through the centerline. Conversely, if you have a headwind on base, it's actually slowing your ground speed down, so you actively need to delay your turn onto final. And once you're on final, if you've got a crosswind, you lay off the drift, meaning you crab or slip the aircraft into the wind, so your actual path over the ground perfectly traces that extended centerline. All right, the climax of our practice rep. Section 5, turning onto final approach, rolling out and lining up. This is where all your setup pays off, or where you're scrambling to fix it. Let me ask you a quick diagnostic question, as if I'm checking your situational awareness from the right seat. Look at the runway out the windshield. Is it appearing shorter and wider than usual? If your answer is yes, we have a problem. That specific visual perspective means the airplane is way too low. You're what we call being dragged in. You immediately need to add power and adjust your pitch to get back up onto the proper, safe glide path. As you roll out, your runway perspective is absolutely everything. Notice how, if your eyes are truly locked on the center line, that line will appear perfectly vertical relative to the horizon, completely regardless of the aircraft's heading or crab angle. A huge mistake students make is trying to make allowances for their offset seating. They think, well, I'm sitting on the left, so the line should be a little to the right. No, your eyes are only about 18 inches from the center of the cockpit. Forget the offset entirely. Put your eyes right down that vertical line and use coordinated rudder and aileron to keep it exactly there. All of this geometry builds up to the concept of a stabilized approach, which honestly is beautiful when you do it correctly. Once you're lined up, established on your speed, and your flaps are set, your aim point on the runway should remain completely fixed in the exact same spot on your windshield. It just stays a constant distance below the horizon. As you get closer, the runway simply expands and grows larger around that fixed point. That right there is the hallmark of a truly stabilized approach. But what happens if that aim point starts drifting? We have absolute rules to fix it, all based on the simple formula: power plus attitude equals performance. If you're undershooting, the aim point will visually start moving up your windshield toward the horizon. To fix it, you add power and raise the nose to maintain your airspeed. If you're overshooting, the aim point moves down the windshield, away from the horizon. Your fix there is to reduce power and lower the nose, or maybe add more flap, while, you guessed it, maintaining that steady airspeed. It's just a continuous, dynamic process of tiny corrections. So the absolutely crucial takeaway is this. We can practice this rep 1,000 times, but physics and wind are completely unpredictable. If you get to the final approach and you're fighting the controls, if you're too high, too low, or the crosswind is shoving you off the center line, if you feel even slightly uncomfortable about the situation, you execute a go-around, no hesitation. You push that throttle forward, climb out, and try it again. A great pilot isn't the one who forces a terrible approach onto the runway. A great pilot is the one who recognizes a bad setup and prioritizes safety above everything else. So I'll leave you with this. Are you willing to throw away a bad approach today to guarantee a safe land-in tomorrow? Keep that in mind next time you take to the skies. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and happy flying!